Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kseniya and I make videos for people who are going through the family immigration process. I'm not an attorney. My videos are based on public information, my own experience, and the experience of my subscribers. And the purpose of my channel is to give you guys the confidence to go through this process completely on your own. Today's video is an updated DS-260 guide. So the green card application guide for those going through consular process. If you have seen my previous guide, not much has changed. I just was able to upload it in a better quality. First, let's sign into our CEAC account, which is the consular account. If you scroll down, you'll be able to see here that you first need to select that you agree to terms and conditions and input your case number. Your case number can be found in your NVC welcome email. Once you click continue, you will then be asked to input your invoice ID number, which can also be found in your NVC welcome email, and select who is logging into the CEAC portal. It doesn't really matter who logs in. The portal will look basically the same for everyone. So let's just for us select applicant, input the security code, and once you do that, click continue. Once you log in on your homepage, you'll be able to see your case information and any messages that the NVC may have sent you. So if we scroll down here, we'll be able to see all the information about the primary applicant and her sponsor and any co-sponsors for this case. If you would like to know how to upload the affidavit of support, how to add a co-sponsor, how to add any household members, I will link a video in the description box which walks you through this part of the process. So the DS-260 application is the immigrant visa application, and we can review it by clicking right here. First, it will take us to the Getting Started page. So the Getting Started page will simply explain to you what they expect while filling out this form. So here, read through this and certify that you agree and click continue. So the first part we'll go through is the personal information. First and foremost, you will be asked to fill in your surname, which is your last name. Your last name should appear exactly as it is listed on your passport or travel document. It is very important that before you fill out the DS-260 application, you have a valid unexpired passport. If you do not have a passport yet, you should apply for it first before you begin filling out this form. And we will talk about passports a little bit later in this video in just a minute. Next, provide your given name, which is your first name. If your first name, like in this example, contains your first and middle name, you can include that here, but only if it is shown in your passport. If your passport does not have a middle name, you can simply just write your first name. Next, you will be asked to write your name as it appears in your native alphabet. This only applies to people whose native alphabet doesn't use English letters, such as Cyrillics, Arabic, Hebrew, Chinese, Japanese characters. You will input that here. Unless that technology is not available to you, then you can click this button. And also, if it doesn't apply to you because your native alphabet uses English letters, you will also click this button. Moving on, they ask you if you have ever used any other names since birth, such as maiden, religious names, professional, and aliases. You do not need to input any nicknames that your family uses with you, for example, but you do need to indicate any other names, last names you have ever used, or variations of spellings of your name, especially if they were listed anywhere on documents. So if we click yes, it will give us a drop-down box to input the names, and you can add as many as necessary. When filling out the other names part, do not leave both of these or any of these blank. For instance, they give you an example here. If you have ever used a different last name, input it here and then copy the first name as it was listed above. Same applies to different first names. If you have ever used a different first name but never changed your last name, write your other given name here and copy the last name. Next, indicate your sex and your current marital status. In our case, Jane is applying as a spouse of a US citizen, so obviously she will indicate that she is married. If you scroll down, they will ask you to provide your date of birth and where you were born. And if the country that you're from no longer exists or uses a different name, use the current name of that country. So scroll down. This is all just standard statement. Make sure to save this information and move on to next part. In the second part, they will ask you your country of origin. So from the drop-down menu, again, select the country you're from and provide information about your passport. This will give you only an option to provide your passport or any other travel document. More likely than not, you're going to fill in your passport. Make sure that the passport you are typing in here is valid and unexpired. Now, a quick word about passports. Like I said earlier, you should have a passport prior to filling out this form. In some cases, people end up waiting for their consular interview for a very long time, and their passport that they indicated in the DS-260 application may also expire. It does happen quite frequently, and that's okay. All you need to do is, once you update your passport, bring the old and the new updated passport to your consular interview. You cannot edit the DS-260 form after it has been submitted, but at your consular interview, if there is any corrections and updates that need to be made, you can do that directly with the consular officer. Moving on, they're asking you if you've ever held any other nationality. If you answer yes, they will then ask you to provide the country where you have in the past or currently hold an additional nationality or citizenship. If you currently have a passport from that country, then they will also ask you to provide that passport information as well. Click Save and move on. The next part of the application is all about your addresses. First, write your present address where you currently reside. You can either write your address as if you translate it to English, or you can transcribe your address into English letters, as I have done here, for example. So this actual address is 215 Krasnaya Street, but I wrote it in English letters as I would write it in Russian, for example. When writing foreign addresses, there has not been an issue with doing it either way. Provide the city and province where you live unless it doesn't apply, postal code, country, region, and when you started living here. If you live at an address that doesn't have house numbers or street names, provide as much detail as you possibly can. Landmarks, intersection of streets, maybe the name of the neighborhood, the name of the village, but don't leave this line blank. You can say that the province or postal code doesn't apply. Next, you will need to provide the history of your previous addresses since you were 16 years old. This form will calculate for you when you became 16, and more likely than not, you will have to answer yes to this question. So if you answer yes, you will then have to provide addresses where you have resided in a reverse chronological order, starting with the address that was immediately before the current address we wrote above and moving backwards to age 16. Even if you studied overseas somewhere or at a college campus in another town or city, that would also be considered your address. You do not have to include places where you were present temporarily, which means hotels, or maybe you visited somewhere for a couple weeks, a couple months. That doesn't really count. And especially provide any addresses that you have also indicated on any past documents, even if the NVC doesn't require you to submit those documents. And indicate when you started living here, to what date, and you can add as many as necessary. So let's add one more. And we have another address here. Sometimes people will get an error when trying to input their address history. And some of the reasons why you may have gotten error is, one, if you had a gap between these addresses, or another issue is just the faulty form, faulty system, you can solve that by either filling out this application using Microsoft Edge, which seems to be the most compatible with this form. Sometimes the page will crash and it won't let you input all the address history. One potential solution I have is when inputting the address immediately before your current address, when inputting the dates, input as if you have lived here since age 16, even if you didn't. Save this page, refresh the application, come back to it, add another address, and correct all the dates. Sometimes that solves the issue. So once we finished inputting our addresses, moving on to phone number, provide your primary phone number and any additional phone numbers that you currently use so that they can reach out to you. The NVC or consulate doesn't really reach out by phone, but they do sometimes in case there is an emergency or something that needs to happen very quickly. Then they will call you, but usually they communicate by email. Answer if you have ever used any other phone numbers. If no, move forward. If yes, input those numbers here, even if you no longer use them. Moving forward, provide your email address and provide any other email addresses maybe that you have used in the past 5 years. Next, provide any social medias that you have used or are currently using. Default option is none, but most people have a social media, so you can provide a social media, let's say Facebook, for example. Then you will need to provide your user ID, your handle, or screen name. I see sometimes online people say that you need to find some kind of Facebook identifier, some kind of string of numbers. That is at all not necessary. You simply need to type in what your address for the social media would appear like in a desktop browser, for example. If you are unsure how to locate this, especially for Facebook, you can go to Settings, Account Center, Profiles, select a Facebook profile, and it will show you your screen name. You can use Instagram, for example, and for Instagram, you simply need to input whatever is followed by the @ sign. Same applies to Twitter. It will only give you a select list of social medias from the drop-down menu. So if you do not see a social media on here, you can always add it over here in the other social media part. And people do ask frequently, should I really disclose all of my social media here? And for security purposes, it is best to provide more information than less information so that you're not charged with misrepresenting facts at any point in the future. So save that and move forward. Next, provide your mailing address. So if your mailing address and your present address that we indicated here are the same, simply click yes. Unless you cannot receive mail at this address, then you will click no, and they will ask you to provide the mailing address where you would like to receive correspondence. The NVC doesn't send much by mail to you during the process, but after the process is complete, they will need to have a legitimate mailing address where they can send your approved passport with the green card. Next, provide your permanent address. So the permanent address is the place where you intend to live after arriving to the US. For family-based cases, this is most likely going to be the address of the petitioner. This can be quite confusing for people who are doing this employment-based or diversity applicants who don't really know where they're going to live. You will need to provide an address of a friend. Perhaps you know somebody, perhaps your employer can help you find an address in the United States where you will reside, or simply provide the name of the hotel where you're planning to stay for the time being. Upon your arrival to the United States, they will double check with you at what address you would like to receive your green card. And this question will ask you if this is where you want your green card to be mailed. If you answer no, say for example, this address doesn't receive mail, then if you answer no, they will ask you to provide an actual mailing address where you would like the physical green card to be delivered. Click save and next. Moving on to family information, here you will be asked to provide information about your parents. Don't forget that this entire application is about the person who is applying for the green card. Fill in the applicant's parents' information, because sometimes I have petitioners asking me, when filling out the DS-260 application for my mom or dad, am I supposed to provide my parents' information? No, you're supposed to provide the applicant's parents' information. And this is asking about biological parents. Unless you have been adopted, then provide the information about your adoptive parents. So first, provide information about your father. Unless you do not know some of these, then you would simply select do not know. And it will ask you if this parent is still living. If yes, then it will ask you where they are residing, but if you click no, you will have to indicate the year of death. Same applies to your mother's information. Pay attention that here you need to provide your mother's last name at birth, so maiden name, not married name or any changed names, when and where they were born. And also they will ask you if this parent is still living. If yes, then they will ask you if their address is the same as your father's. So in this case, because our father is deceased, then you could technically answer no and provide the address of your mom. But it is also acceptable to answer yes in this case. Or if both of your parents live at the same address, then obviously you'll answer yes and provide the current address where this parent resides. Click save and next. Provide information about your spouse. This is only asking about the current spouse, and this is because in the beginning of the application we indicated that we were married. So provide the name of your current spouse, when they were born, and where they were born, and provide their address. So from the drop-down menu, you can say that they do live at the present address, which is the address we indicated where we're planning to reside upon arrival to the United States, and provide their occupation. If you can't find an occupation on the list, you can select other and type in what this person's occupation is, and provide the date and the place of your marriage, where it occurred, and if anything doesn't apply, you can simply leave it blank or click does not apply. So next they will ask you if your spouse is immigrating to the US with you. Some people get confused with this question, especially if their petitioning spouse lives overseas with them and is planning to return to the United States with their spouse once the green card is approved. You would still answer no to this question because your petitioning spouse would not be immigrating to the US with you. They do not need to immigrate. They are already a citizen or a permanent resident. Either way, the answer in that situation will always be no, because even if your spouse is traveling with you, doesn't mean that they're immigrating with you. And if you answer no, they will also ask if your spouse is immigrating at a later date to join you. This is a follow to join process. And again, this does not apply to our situation. We will answer no. The only time you would answer yes to any of these questions is if your spouse was your derivative. So if you, for example, were a primary applicant on an employment-based visa, for example, and your spouse was included as a derivative on the same petition, then you would answer yes. If your spouse is already a citizen, a resident, or if your spouse has their own separate petition, you would answer no to this question. Sometimes I get a question from petitioners who are filling out forms for both of their parents, and they're wondering if, say, they're filling out this form for their mom and the question asks about their dad, if the dad will be also immigrating with mom, you technically would still answer no because the dad has his own petition, his own green card case. Moving on, provide information about your previous spouses. So if you have any previous spouses, if you answer yes, it will then ask you to provide the number of previous spouses and their information such as name, date of birth, when you got married, when the marriage ended and how it was ended, either divorce or death of a spouse, something like that, and where it was terminated. And if you have more than one spouse, then obviously click add another as necessary. Save. moving on to children. So this note up top here is just letting you know that if you are applying as immediate relative of a US citizen or conditional relative of a US citizen, so spouses, children, and parents of US citizens are all immediate relatives, and they're not allowed to have derivative family members. All this basically means is that if you are a spouse, a child, or a parent of a US citizen, you're not allowed to bring your spouses or underage children on the same petition, and that your US citizen petitioner must fill out a separate immediate relative petition for each of these relatives. So it is just letting you know that the children you're indicating in this application, if you fall under any of these visa categories, which we are, any children that we indicate here will not be automatically included on the same green card case. And if we would like those children to immigrate to the US, if they're not yet citizens, then the petitioner would have to file a separate petition for each child. So if you click you have children, it will ask you then to provide the number of children you have and the following information about each child. You will need to provide information about all natural, adopted children and stepchildren. Sometimes people will ask if I should include stepchildren here that are children of your US citizen spouse. And technically, yes, if your US citizen spouse's children or your permanent resident spouse's children are still under the age of 18 at the time you got married, they're technically considered your stepchildren. So yes, you will need to count them here as your stepchildren. And also you will only need to include living children. Next, it will ask you if the child lives with you. You would answer yes or no. Then they will ask if this child is immigrating to the US with you. This is the same question that they asked us about the spouse earlier on. So if the child is already a citizen, then you will always answer no to this question. Even if they're going to be traveling with you, they're not going to be immigrating with you. If they are allowed to be a derivative, then you would answer yes if they are included on the same petition. But even if your child is not a citizen or a permanent resident yet, and they're planning to immigrate because their petitioner filed a separate petition for them, you would also answer no to this question because they're not immigrating with you. They're immigrating on their own as part of their own green card case. And if you answer no, then they will also ask if this child is immigrating to the US at a later date to join you. If our child is a US citizen or if our child has a separate petition, we would equally answer no to this question. And you can add as many children as necessary here. And let's move on. Next, they're asking to provide information about your previous travel to the United States. First, they're asking if you have ever been in the United States. If you answer yes, then you will be asked to provide information whether or not you've ever been given an A number. If you have come to the US before on a tourist visa or other non-immigrant visa, you probably do not have an alien number. And then you will need to provide information on your last 5 US visits. So you'll be asked to provide when you arrived to the United States and how long you stayed. You would need to select either months or days if you stayed less than a month. If you have already departed the United States, you still should be able to obtain your travel history by going to the cbp.gov website and inputting the information from the passport you used on your last US travel to obtain your I-94 and travel history. If you have been in the United States before, you probably had a US visa. So if you answer yes, then they will ask you provide the following information about the visa, when it was issued, what kind of visa it was, unless you don't remember the visa number, unless you don't remember, and if this visa has ever been lost or stolen, or if you've ever had visas revoked or canceled. If this visa is from a previous passport, for example, you no longer have access to that passport, then you would answer yes to this question and you would be asked to explain what happened to that visa. Additionally, if you traveled to the United States in the past on a visa waiver program, you would answer no to this question because ESTA, visa waiver, is technically not a visa. And if you have ever been refused a visa or been refused admission to the United States, this would count if you, say, flew to the United States and then at the airport they refused your admission and sent you back on another flight. Click next. Provide your information about your work, education, and training. So first, your current primary occupation. If you cannot find it on the list that they give you in the drop-down menu, you can write what it is here and provide your employer's name. Or if you are a student, which is also one of the options, then you would have to indicate that you are a student and the name of the university, college, or school that you are attending right now. Next, it will ask you if you have any more occupations. If you have more than one, say yes, and also provide basically all the same information as asked above. They will also ask you what occupation do you intend to work in the United States. But what I would say is for family-based petitions, this question is not as important as it is for employment applicants and other types of green cards. If this is an application for a minor child, then you would indicate either student or other and explain the situation. Save and next. Provide the information about your additional travel history. They will ask you if you have traveled to any other countries in the last 5 years. If you answer yes, they will ask you to select the country you went to and some additional info. You can add as many as necessary. Let's say no, for example, and then you will be asked if you have ever served in the military. If you answer yes, you'll need to provide information about when you served, where, and what type of service you were part of. So go next. Next, provide the information about your petitioner. So for family-based, this is fairly easy. For employment-based, this would be your employer in the United States. And one of the options is self, and self-petition is only for people who petition themselves for example, extraordinary ability employment visa or diversity. Click next. The last part of this application is a long list of yes or no security questions. I'm not going to go over every single one of these security questions, but I will pay your attention to a few that tend to have the most questions. So this second question right here asks if you have documentation to establish that you have received vaccinations that are necessary for your admission to the United States. You can double check what vaccines are required on the Department of State website or the CDC. And if you do have records to show that you have received all of those vaccines, you can select yes. In a lot of cases, people do not have records of their prior vaccinations, and it's okay to answer no. If you answer no, you will then be asked to explain. And if this is the case for you, you can write something like this. Records of vaccinations are not available. Applicant will receive all necessary vaccinations during pre-interview medical examination. Because you will have to complete a medical exam for your green card case, and the qualified panel physician will then be able to administer any missing vaccinations. So next, they will ask if you have any disorders, drug abuse, etc. Save. Moving forward. Again, these are questions about your criminal background, so read every single question very carefully, answer yes or no. And if in this particular part of the application you have to answer yes to any of the questions, you probably shouldn't be doing this application on your own because there's a high chance of denial. So make sure that you consult with an immigration attorney who can guide you through this section and discuss your options with you. One question that can raise some confusion is regarding the membership of the Communist Party. Applicants who are coming from China, for example, or other countries that are currently under communist regime probably will have to say yes to this question, unfortunately, and you probably shouldn't be doing this application on your own just because an experienced immigration attorney can help you navigate on how to respond to this particular question and maybe provide evidence so that you're not made inadmissible for a green card. And another question that I see that people tend to have confusion about is, have you ever been deported or removed from any other country? Now, keep in mind that this only means actual legal proceedings involved in removal or deportation. But if you try to enter another country and you were turned away at the border, that doesn't actually mean removal or deportation. So keep that in mind. The next question that some people tend to have confusion is about whether you were a J visa exchange visitor and you were subject to a 2-year foreign residence requirement. So if you had a J visa, doesn't necessarily mean you were subjected to the 2-year residency requirement. You should check the J visa in your passport to see if you are subject to it. There will be a statement on your visa that will indicate it. If you have not yet completed the foreign residence requirement, you have to answer yes. The next question that asks if you are likely to become public charge after you're admitted to the United States. Now, this one can be a little bit tricky because it is not asking if you're just subjected to the public charge rule. It is actually asking if you're likely to become public charge, which means are you likely to become reliant on public assistance? In most cases, especially for family-based, employment-based visa applicants, your answer will probably be no because you have an actual sponsor. Any applicant who has a properly filed and accepted affidavit of support will answer no to this question. Now, the last part of this application will ask if you would like to receive a social security number. If you have ever been issued a social security number in the past, even if you were in the United States a long time ago, you will still answer yes because your social security number always stays the same. If you have applied for a social security number in the past and answer yes, they will ask you to provide that number unless you don't remember. And it is important that you obtain a social security number. So if you would like to do that through this application, which is way faster and easier than you applying for this number on your own after arriving to the United States, then you should click yes. You will need to authorize the Social Security Administration to be able to communicate with the Department of Homeland Security. If you answer no, you will not receive a Social Security number and you will have to apply for it on your own after you come to the United States, which is a long time and it is a lot of pain. So it is best to apply for it in this application. It is important that you have a Social Security number in the United States, just because without it, you will not be able to find a job, pay taxes, apply for a bank account, medical insurance, etc. As a permanent resident, you absolutely need a social security number. Select yes, save, and move forward. So we are at the end of this application. This last part will give you an opportunity to review your entire application, starting with all the personal information that you have provided. So review it carefully, and it will guide you through every single section that you have filled out. Once you review your entire application, keep clicking next over here. And at the very end, they will ask you to sign your application electronically. You will need to read a very long statement here before you sign and submit. And at the very bottom, when you scroll all the way down, you will need to include your NVC case number, which you typed in when you were signing into your account, and enter your passport number. One question I get a lot is, whose passport number should I type in here? Especially if it is the petitioner logging in and helping the applicant fill out this information. This is the passport number of the person applying for the green card. It will not let you bypass this if you type in someone else's or petitioner's passport number. It must match the passport number that we filled out in the actual application. So once you click sign and submit your application, you will then be taken to your confirmation page. Once you submit your form DS-260, you cannot make changes in the form. The only way to make changes in your form, if you realize you've made a mistake, is to bring any updated information to your consular interview. You can also try to make any corrections by using the public inquiry form on the NVC website, but they do not really respond to those public inquiry forms and they don't really see them for weeks. So your best bet is to bring any updates, any changes to the interview. Make sure that you print the confirmation because you will need it in order to confirm your consular interview. I also suggest that you print the entire DS-260 form for your own records. One thing that I get often is, what kind of civil documents am I required to submit for my application? And the Civil Documents tab will only appear after you fill in your DS-260 application, because the civil documents that they will require from you will all depend on the answers that you have provided in your DS-260 form. I will make a future video about how to navigate your CEAC portal and how to upload these civil documents, but for now, I hope that this video was useful for you. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up, and I hope to see you guys in my next videos. Bye!